right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this panel. We are going to be talking about creative world building and Black history. As creators, as people of color, as humans in this world, we all take an active role in creating the world around us. Some things you inherit, some things you're able to create, manipulate, change, and make special. The artists we have with us today are creators who make the world special. They create narratives, they create their entire worlds in comic books and graphic novels. So we're going to talk more about how that works. We're going to start with a little bit of an introduction. They both have some parallels. Both have two daughters, and both were born outside of the US, but came here relatively young. And so we're going to start off there talking about early life. So we've got Jacques Nyemb and Newton Lilavois. And we are going to start by asking, what do you feel your connection to your narrative story making has to do with your history, with the fact that you were born with 2 feet on different lands?
You want to go first, Jack?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So, like it was mentioned, I wasn't born here. I was born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. I came here when I was 5 years old. Moved to Brooklyn, New York, specifically East Flatbush, Brooklyn, New York. And growing up, my neighborhood was primarily West Indian. So you had a lot of Jamaicans, Haitians, Trinidadians, St. Vincentians, everyone, Barbadians, they're all there. So you had this interesting cultural dynamic of an immigrant population, but a lot of the young folks had come here when they were early or really assimilated pretty quickly. And so everyone was pretty much, people around my age, the young people were pretty much Americanized. But at the same time, they also reflected the countries or the origins of their families. So you saw that huge mixture. And so everyone was really proud of where they were from, whether it was from Haiti, Jamaica, or Trinidad. So that pride in your nation really carried on with me also. So even growing up young, I've always had this pride of coming from Haiti, and that pride was even stronger because as I was growing up in the West Indians, um, Haitians really have like it's like this stereotype within a smaller community in the Caribbean where Haitians are stereotyped, right? And so as a youngster, you had some people who would actually tease you because you were Haitian. And I remember there was this one time in particular, a friend of mine, and he didn't mean any harm by it, but when I had first moved, I had transferred to a new school, and he found out that I was Haitian, and he was like, "Oh, don't tell anybody you're Haitian." So that really struck me, and from that point on, I made sure that everybody always knew I was Haitian,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So
So what kind of stereotypes were you referencing? I mean, in Louisiana, we're all everything. And even though that happens, there are certain degrees and certain types of stereotypes that exist outside of our region that, people have to contend with that we may not know here in Louisiana. So I have no clue what a stereotype of a Haitian would be.
yeah, oddly enough, it's strange because the stereotypes were really amongst the Caribbean, right? Because
Okay.
the Haitians um, are known in the Caribbean, right? Because Haiti's a real poor country, so there's a lot of
Well, it is
immigration, right?
now.
Like besides immigrating to America, they immigrate all over. So like they'll go to Cuba, Jamaica,
Mhm.
Dominican Republic, anywhere to find jobs. So I guess you could kind of say, and this is in no disrespect to Mexicans, but it was sort of like Haitians are like, or like the Mexican versions of, how Mexicans are treated here.
Mhm.
Pretty much that kind of stereotype.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, and they American, so Black Americans really weren't familiar with this kind of stereotype. So it's
Right.
not like it really kind of like it was concentrated within the Caribbean, really.
Mm.
So
But I mean, when that's the majority of the people that you're interacting with on a regular basis, you're going to
yeah,
find a way to say to other you, I
yeah.
guess, even whenever it seems fairly homogenous to, people outside of that
hmm
experience. And
So,
how about, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. You were gonna say something. Go
Now,
ahead.
I was just going to ask Jacques, so what kind of experiences did you have
Yeah.
with both feet on different grounds?
For me, I had an interesting experience because I was half and half.
Right.
My dad is from Cameroon, Africa. My mom is from the United States, from North Carolina.
Mhm.
So I had both experiences and none of the experiences at the same time, which is kind of
Mm,
weird because
mm,
in Africa and Cameroon, I lived there until I was 11. I was known as the American because my mom is American. And when I came to the United States, I was known as the African. So
yeah.
is this weirdness where I I know about both cultures very well because of my parents, and I am of both cultures, but
Mhm.
I also is odd because regardless of which area I'm at, I'm seen as the opposite of the other rather than seeing as all of it. So
Mhm.
it's been a unique experience. And for me in writing, I think it's helped my writing a lot because it allowed me to see the 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 not so unique things that we think we have, the shared experience that we have even through the diaspora in terms of being African and Black American. Still the experience may be different, but there's still the connection is not severed. It's still there. There's still a
Right.
lot of the same things happening, the same type of people and the same experiences and togetherness. So I think in my writing, I like to write things in that way in terms of showing two sides of the same thing, but showing the unity in our experiences, even though we may think it may be different.
Yeah. I think that that's one of the rare things that art and culture and history can do is it shows our commonality much more than our differences. Even whenever we're pointing out specifically what makes us so unique, a lot of it is an overlap. There's very few people that can lack all commonality to humanity in general. So a little bit about me. I'm Rodneyna Hart. I'm the Museum Division Director for the state of Louisiana, which means that I'm over 4 different museums within the state. And at one of them, the Capitol Park Museum in Baton Rouge, we're about to open the Negro Motorist Green Book exhibition. It's a Smithsonian exhibition that's traveling, and we're the only location in Louisiana that's going to have this exhibition. It opens August 21st and it'll run through November 14th. But in that, we've been looking at what are the unique things that were experienced by the people who had to use the Green Book. What historical, what cultural, how was this guidebook something that made their lives safer, better, more enriched? How did it inform travel? And what kind of world that they live in that is now referenced in comic books, in history. I know that there's that Jonas has a reference back to 1963 at the beginning of the Crescent City Monsters book. And we're understanding his origin. Can we talk a little more about like what was it to create a Black character in 1963?
Yeah, sure. So the interesting thing was that originally, so that's the first issue you're talking about, and it starts
Right.
off in 1963, like you mentioned. But
Mhm.
originally, the first issue was going to take place in near present time, right?
Mhm.
But then I wanted to ask, so I asked my question, well, I wanted to put the character in a situation where there was a lot of conflict, but I wanted the conflict to be something that was already naturally there, or just historically there.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when I thought, why not the civil rights era, right? There, that when you look back at that era was crazy, and I think it, in my personal opinion, even crazier than it is now. I mean, just the turmoil and the conflicts that you had. I thought that was a perfect time for like to start a supernatural horror book, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and then there was a second part to it where I wanted to kind of have the character in a situation where I'm saying, well, a lot of people were saying uh, times have changed, but then I want to put the character in a situation where, you're asking yourself, well, how much of it has changed, right?
Right,
So
right.
there's a scene in it where he runs into the cops, right? And so I wanted to play that interaction, and when people are reading it, they think about what's going on now with
Mm-hmm.
the cops. And I wanted to in the dialogue, if you when you're reading it, the interaction between him and the cop, the words I use are specifically to kind of throw the ideas of what people or what I think the current police situation, how they see us
Mm-hmm.
then, and exactly is this exactly the same way they see us now, and show you that some things haven't changed. So
Yeah,
that was important to me, and I thought it worked out perfectly in the story.
I think so too. Now, with characters that you've both built, there are powers. There are supernatural superpowers. There are powers within social dynamics. There are different things that they're able to wield in different ways. So, do you feel that power is a burden or a blessing?
On my end, if one of the stories that I wrote is Not So Super, which is a book that is going to be a trade with a fuller story, which will be ending in in next year, hopefully. But
Mm-hmm.
in my story writing, I'd like to see as power is what you make of it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel as though it has the ability, you have the ability to change things, or you have the ability to be stuck in the situation you're in. And for the story that I wrote for Not So Super, the character is given a power to do anything he wants, but he is not aware and not able to control it. He does not know when it's going to happen and what it's going to do to him and those around him. So he has all this power, but does not know how to use it. And he's trying to survive in this world and live a very real world like the rest of us, but in a comic book sense. But um, he has this power, but doesn't know how to use it. And I think in the story that I wrote is more trying to explore that feeling of feeling at the beginning of the story, he feels powerless, but now
Yeah,
he has powers,
right.
but doesn't know how to use it, and is trying to make sense out of it. And as you were saying, I'm drawing parallels of reality and us and our experiences is what happens when you have power. What do you do with it? So
Right.
to answer your question, power is to me is what you do of it. You could change the world with it, or you can fight with it and try to figure out how to use it. And it's up to you to do with it as you please.
You know, it reminds me of a quote. There's a community developer who said that um, talent is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not. And I think that a lot of people face the fact that they have power, they have intelligence, they have capacity, they have so many wonderful things to offer. You know, there's a comedian who said that there's always been a Barack Obama. There's always been someone who could be president, but that opportunity has not always existed. And so, how do you feel that power and opportunity kind of interwork? Like, do you feel that we are able to empower ourselves for the most part, or that it's more of a luck of the draw and opportunity opening up for people? What has been your personal experience?
My personal experience, I feel as though it's luck. A big part of the big success that you see a lot of people receive, it's luck. But you have to be prepared for that moment of whenever something happened, and you might get where you want to go if you constantly are toiling and moving forward and the right opportunity hits. But the thing that I always like to tell people, because I am a publisher, but my goal is to enjoy the journey, whether or not I make it to the destination I want to make to. Because a lot of times we are so focused on the end goal that we kind of miss the point that if you never make it to the end goal, you spend all this time hustling and hurting yourself and trying to make it to this point. And by the time you make it to the end goal, there's nothing there. Was it worth it? So enjoying the process of making it, whether or not the luck goes for you, just enjoy what you're doing, learn from it, and move forward. And you may be one of those that end up being on the big screen. But if not, you have written something, you have done something in your life, something worthwhile, and your experience is worthwhile.
So
Yeah,
please.
Oh, yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, Jacques really said a couple of excellent things that I really agree with. The first one being that, yeah, there's luck to it, but you have to be prepared. I find that even before I was doing comic books, and I used to get into all sorts of different things, I find that when you're out there and you're doing what you need to do, because there's a lot of people out there, unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there who have ideas, and they're like, oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna make a film, but they don't act on it, right? And when you don't act on it, luck will not come, right? Because you haven't done anything.
That's true.
Yeah.
So like even if you're out there just a little bit, you'd be amazed at how much people reach out to you. Like let's say you want to start a film, right? But you don't have the money to start a film, but you go around filming stuff with your camera phone and make these little TikTok stuff, right?
Yep.
And you can start from there, and people start reaching out to you, and then that's where the luck kicks in, right? The important thing is that it's amazing to me, like how many people have so many good ideas that they're afraid to share it. They're like, oh, I'm afraid somebody will steal it, or I don't want to show my stuff just yet because I don't want anybody copying it, or it's just not right. I'm telling you, don't be afraid to first. No one's really going to steal your ideas, because the one thing I've learned is that not every idea is unique. Like I could come up with an idea, I bet you somebody else has the same idea somewhere else. Yeah, but what is different though is the implementation of the idea. So I can tell you, I tell people like my story ideas all the time. Oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. But I know, and I tell them knowing that they're not gonna, even if like they like let's say they took the idea, right, they wouldn't implement it to the same way that I do, right? It'll be like a totally different execution. So things like that, don't worry about it. Just go out there, and just by being out there you will create that luck. And then the second thing that Jacques had said is the journey part. I was telling somebody that just like a couple of days, the same exact thing Jacques had said, that like right now, I'm a publisher just like Jacques, and my goal, of course, is to be publishing a lot of stories, broadening my fan base, just getting my stories out there to as many people as possible. I'm at a certain level. I'm here, and I'm trying to get here, but I'm enjoying the journey, because I know once I get there, right, I'm gonna ask myself, okay, what's next?
What's next?
And then I'm gonna try to get here, right? So
Exactly.
you end up never really being happy because you reach the goal, or you'll just be temporarily happy. So you have to learn to enjoy the journey, because you'll never be satisfied if you just if the goal is your
Especially if
ultimate.
you're an ambitious person, then definitely you're going to constantly be moving that finish line. And that's a good thing, but you also have to establish the benchmarks, and celebrate
Yeah.
the little thing, every victory along the way. So, what stories in history have you discovered in your research, in your studies, in your world building that you are excited to share with the world?
I guess I could go. So
Yeah, go ahead.
this one, for me, is a story that I want to tell because I was doing a lot of research on New Orleans, right? And
Mhm,
then one of them, of course, was the Indian chiefs. And as I was watching videos, and then when I went to New Orleans to do research for the book, I actually went to visit a museum where they had all, like, not all, but a lot of the different designs that the Indian chiefs would wear.
mhm,
So, and I was just amazed at the whole kind of the society and the subculture they built around it. And
mhm,
I was like, it's almost supernatural. And I was like, I want to really incorporate that into my book. And I've been trying to figure out the best way to do that because, as I was doing my research, I wanted to do it in such a respectful way because, as a creator, usually you have a baseline of facts, and, especially if it's like historical, and but you don't want to be limited by it. You want
right,
to have you're still a creator, so you want to use your imagination. So usually there's a twist that's not exactly the same. So I'm trying to
sure,
balance that line between being respectful and at the same time being creative. So
right.
just featuring that whole subculture with the Indian chiefs in my
Mm,
book is one of the things that I'd I'd really like to introduce the audience to, because you don't really see it
wonderful,
in the supernatural world, or like when they talk about New Orleans, and
right.
you'll have a show based in New Orleans. I haven't seen anything where that really shows that, so I'd really like to include that in my book.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, it's definitely an important part of Louisiana living, and that's something that can definitely be shared with the rest of the world. Um,
For, for
Please.
me, I wrote a book of six short stories that I've written, genre bending stories about Blackness, and it's called Black Living, and it should be coming out like in the next 2 months. But it's a book where I wanted to do something unique, is writing stories about the Black experience, but in genre bending ways. So there's stories, for example, of one story called Awakening about an enslaved woman who escaped the plantation but ends up having a power, which is she a power, which we end up finding what it is. And my goal in this storytelling was to kind of show the experience of that time period, but how she gained agency and freed herself and got out of that situation and returned.
Mhm,
And the story, in order for the story to be believable, I had to do a lot of reading and digging about the past and just making the scene believable, but also realistic to the time period, but also while adding the lore of transformation and powers and abilities within a story to make it gel together and seamless so that it doesn't seem jarring, but yet still be interesting. But I also did other stories, like one of a janitor who's an elderly man in a large bank. And as you read the story, and at the beginning of the story, you find out quickly that he is a spy.
mm,
And he's honest, he is spying corporate spies, and is and you realize you're in the future, and you realize that he's an older man, but you experience how he's treated by white people and everyone within the building that he's working in as a janitor, yet
right,
he knows everything that is going on. And you know
right.
about he is using the power of being where in his situation to stem the tide of inequality with wealth gaps and everything. And it's a mystery, and it's interesting, and it's delved different genres, but it still talks of the past, but
Right.
finds a way of bridging a gap and looking ahead about what is happening, and trying to do it in a way that is seamless.
Yeah, and also, we think of janitors and staff members of that nature and the
Mm-hmm.
relative invisibility that they have and the access
Yep.
that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
exactly.
something that, I mean, I definitely see that as great fodder for any kind of character. That sounds excellent. I'm definitely gonna look it up. So, something that you reference in one series that you've done is hunger. And it made me think of like, what role does hunger play as a physical role in the comic? And then how does it fit into the broader worldview of food insecurity? Like, it seemed like the surface was talking about something, you know, food versus consumer, but also like what else were we supposed to take from this?
Are we talking about the Smorgasbord Squad?
I am talking about the Smorgasbord Squad.
Okay,
yes,
all right.
Very cool.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. It was an interesting story. That one I was going more for. It was supposed to go for younger children. Not they don't get that point, but as an adult, that you got it, which is interesting and it's great. I'm glad that it's working the way it should have. The kids really like costume vigilantes that go and save their city from an evil group of people that steal the food from all of the different homes and all of the different places in
any talking burrito, like I'm here for it. Like, we're just done. Like, yes.
You did your research. You said you didn't delve as deeply, but it seems like you've
no,
delved
not
deeper.
as deeply as I normally do. Like normally I know your kindergartner's teacher's name, but this time it's just I'm just familiar. But no, I mean they're very cool. And I love the way that it's illustrated. It does feel youthful, but there's something like for everyone who's taking place and consuming this work. All puns intended.
but exactly what you're saying, though, I do appreciate you putting it out there. But the stories is very important to showcase reality in a way that is interesting, because I feel for far too long we have. I feel like one of the tropes and the things that I try not to say, I want to create something that something for my kids that they have never seen. But I have gone to enough conventions and seen enough Black creators to know that what I want to create, it exists. The people are making those things. And so I try not to say that. But what I'm trying to say is I try to use my voice to shine something that I find interesting and try to put it in a story so that young kids and adults alike can find something and learn something in something that I write. So, and as you talk about food insecurity, this is a light comic. You wouldn't think about it, but as you read it more and more and you keep reading it, you start thinking about food insecurity. You think about
general resources and distribution of, and that there's a lot of taking and not a lot of sharing, and that there are some people who are disproportionately affected. There were a lot of layers there. I enjoyed that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So I did want to also talk about the way that you address monsters. Okay, so on one hand we have we've got the Walking Dead understanding of a zombie, and then we have the Haitian zombie, which is a very specific monster, and historically a not just cryptozoology, but something that has a history of existing in a culture. And then we've got a vampire that's a vegan, and like trying to figure out like, how do I deal with this new world of craving flesh, and what do I do about that? So I'd like to talk specifically about those, but you can speak broadly about how your unique point of view talks to the creation of your characters. So
so specifically about the zombies, I'm glad you brought that up, because originally that's where the idea of the Crescent City Monsters kind of germinated, right? I wanted to create a zombie stories because I was a big fan of Robert Kirkman's Walking Dead comic book series.
Same. Yes.
Even before the TV
even before the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was so great the way that he was able to create these comics, and then they take some of the characters and leave some elements, and it just felt familiar, but it's a whole new experience. I love the way they develop the characters in the comic and on the screen. Anyway.
No worries. I'm a big fan too. So Yeah, so I love the series. I love what he did with the characters, and I was like, and I've even read some behind the scenes articles about what Kirkman did to get the comic book series created. Turns out
Yeah,
that he pitched it as a zombie story, and his editor was like, "No,
yeah.
no one buys zombie comic books,"
Mm.
and so he lied to them and said, "No, no, no, there's gonna be some aliens in like issue 10," and by the time the editors realized that he had lied and that there were going to be no
It was too
aliens,
late.
it was too late. Yeah, and it was successful. So I was like the cojones on this guy. So I was like,
Right?
what? I was like, so I was like, I wanted to create a zombie story, but I wanted one that was more of, like you said, the Haitian voodoo version of what a zombie is, right? And
Right. So what's the
Haiti,
difference?
so in Haiti, in Haitian voodoo, when zombie is created, there's someone who creates that zombie.
Mm-hmm.
They actually cause the death and the rebirth of that person, and they're basically in control of that person.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the viewpoint of where I wanted my zombies to come from. Like I didn't want them to be this like, oh, just eating people, kind of like zombies. The
Right.
zombies I'm creating are going to be based on that paradigm of what a zombie is, or that
And
viewpoint.
so we deal with like a loss of agency and the ability for the individual to be of their own control. It was that a metaphor for also an understanding of the way that people have lost their agency in society, and that they are under control of certain elements outside themselves that they are no longer able to represent, and now they're viewed as these monsters.
Yeah, that's like, to me, that's even more horrific than the
Exactly.
zombies, because now you're a person who all of a sudden you're living your life normally, and boom, somebody takes your life away. Now, not only that, but now they're in control of you,
Hmm.
right? So I mean, if that's not hell, well, I don't know what is, right?
Well, I
Your
mean,
life is taken away with.
it reminds
Yeah,
me of our prison system, and again that loss of your agency of your life and your body, and how you are now working for the only legalized slavery that still exists in America. And Louisiana has the highest per capita rate of imprisonment in the state, well, really in the world. So it's something that it's pretty ever present in our existence here. And I think it's a quarter of all Black men can get caught up. And it's a real issue. It's something that is faced in Louisiana in a way that is not necessarily the same everywhere else. That how easily you can lose your freedom, how quickly your life can be changed and altered over things that are not things that are trivial, but things that could have been um, let go had you had different skin or a different type of agency in the world. So that's whenever I think of zombie, whenever I think of enslavement as again that loss of agency, that taking away of options and future. Um,
yeah, that's one of the great things I found about that approach too, is that it could be used in so many ways, from what you're talking about with the imprisonment to just somebody on a personal level, so, and the idea of your life taken unjustly taken
yes.
away from you,
Mhm.
and and it's interesting because it's your life, right, taken away from you, but now you're living a different life, not under your control,
Right.
so I find that very powerful.
Yes, absolutely. So from this very, very heavy to a much lighter take on a monster, this bite. So in the comics,
uh,
this bite by Jacques, he talks about someone who from birth was a vegan, had no interest in consuming flesh or blood of anyone. And then that moral imperative of who am I, as who, like you are what you eat. Who am I?
uh,
then too, like if you are what you eat humans, you're already human, so it kind of works.
It kind of does.
It kind of works. But how did you come up with this concept? Like, what was precipitating event?
For me, I always like scenarios that are hard to write yourself out of, and all the stories that I write, I like to write stories where how am I going to write myself out of this one? And this story, finding out how is this character going to survive. The thought process for me was I was trying to figure out a way to make this character survive being a vampire and choose not to eat a human at all and see how he will make it through. And since the fun part about making a comic and the fun part of it being silly, it can have whatever outcome I want it to have. So so it's not going that I'm not giving away endings since we're only on issue 1, but I do want it to explore the vampire lore and change it to my liking in a funny way for kids and just kind of explore that. And also in the same vein, talking about something that most kids probably don't think about is eating veggies and just making something interesting and fun in that aspect. But I digress.
Not really. It's all relevant. It's all relevant to the conversation. So something that I love about comic books is its encouragement of literacy and art in youth. We're all exposed to these comics. We start at 5 or 7 years old, and we consume this information in a vigorous way. And it really does encourage children to become more literate and to be interested in art early. I can remember drawing Spider-Man comics in middle school I read that you made comics and sold them in middle school. I did the same thing, but I did like drawings and things because kids like that stuff, and you get to experience drawing and you make a little bit of money, hopefully, sometimes, probably 50 whole cents.
Oh yeah.
But like, what was that aha moment for you when you're like, this is something that I can do, and it encourages people to read things, it shows off my art, it really resonates with the person I am and the storyteller that I am. What was that moment for you?
So the moment for me, I guess, was like you mentioned. I used to draw comic books. I don't draw anymore, strictly, right? You don't want to buy a comic book that I draw, but
okay.
but,
doesn't have to be good. It just has to.
Yeah. So when I was younger, I thought, I was one of the best artists in the world, and so I used to draw my own comic books,
Yeah.
and so, and I guess the aha moment was when you replicate the actual comic book, so you have a cover, and
Yes.
you have the title and the superhero on the front, and I used to have the price, and it was just something I did because comic books had prices, and
Right.
a fellow classmate came and was like, hey, can I buy that off of you? And he bought it, and I was just kind of like, wow, okay. It felt like now, I knew there was a value to I felt like there was a value because it was something cool and fun I like to do. But then I don't know, when somebody gives you money for when
Right.
you do it, that's like the next level. You're like, okay.
Yeah, I'm professional now. I can quit my job as a student.
I'm quitting school right now. No.
Right?
So that had me thinking, and then another big thing was that same classmate, his mother would give him money to give to me when she found out that I was doing this.
Yeah.
So, and I never met his mother, but so I knew because he would say, yeah, my mom is giving me money. So whenever you come out with books, just let me know. And I knew that it was someone who had seen what I was doing and was encouraging me.
Exactly.
And I didn't know why she was doing it. I figured, yeah, because it was a nice thing to do. But I knew there was like something deeper to it, right? So like somebody's encouraging you like that,
Yeah.
you know that, hey, maybe what I'm doing is worth what I'm doing, right? Like
Right.
Why someone wouldn't encourage me like this if what I was doing wasn't worth it? So,
Right.
I mean,
There's a
just
certain
outside of the
validity
money.
in that kind of attention.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I've never met the woman. She didn't know me, but she unknowingly had a small impact, or an impact on my life, I should say. It's
That's
hard
beautiful.
to scale these things, but
Yeah.
yeah, she had an impact in my life. So that was the aha moment.
Hmm.
And then there were some other aha moments when I got older, because my 9 to 5, I'm an IT consultant. I really ended up being a computer programmer instead of a writer. But um, uh, when I did start like 3, 4 years ago, like, hey, I want to do comic books on the side. Uh, just the aha moment was when I started going to like panels, not comic book panels, comic book cons, and selling my books and just interacting with the people, and seeing how fans reacted to that. It was just like that was like one of the aha moments, like, wow, okay, you know, this is something I'd rather be doing
Right. Yes.
than sitting
Like
on a
something that's
computer.
really bringing you some joy.
Yeah, nobody's ever said, "Oh, your piece of code is so beautiful and it really changed my," what I mean?
I'm a
Inspirational
web
code.
developer, so I feel your pain, Newton. I feel
Yeah.
your pain.
Yeah,
That's no one cares about your code.
yeah, so yeah.
I mean, but
So
it's also
But
wonderful to have that, you've got these little day jobs to fall back on. That's wonderful.
yeah, yeah.
But, we know the important work that you do. Well, of
Yep.
Yeah,
course, as fathers, but also creating beautiful things that will last in perpetuity. So, what impact do you want your comic books to have on the world? Why are you doing this?
personally, for me, I make comics because I just want to further a narrative of exploring Blackness in many faceted ways. As I told you earlier, I'm trying to write genre bending stories, but I one thing that in the forward of the book that I'm writing that'll be out next month, I wrote that whenever I get a book and I don't know, or watch a movie or look at anything without knowing anything about someone who wrote it, I can quickly identify that the person who wrote it is Black. And even if it's a show, even if it's a movie that there's nothing to do with Blackness, there's something about our shared experience, that there's something about your life that that's the only way someone knows that is either they are very, very close to Black folks or they're Black themselves. And 90% of the time when I go and search and see who the writer is, that person is Black. And I feel like that experience is needed and is important for us to see ourselves in multifaceted ways. And then there's a lot of great creators who are doing the work, but I feel like I write differently from other folks. Some folks are good at writing compelling stories that drives you to action, and others have good stories that drives you to be contemplative. But for me, I tend to write a story that at first, as you read it, it's an interesting story, but as you keep thinking about it, the more it makes sense to you and you start seeing the world differently. And the reason why I focus on all age is because I feel like younger children and teenagers need these types of stories that help them see the world, see themselves in the future, but also see, have stories that once later on in life, they will have a touch point that kind of reminds them of, oh, when I was 10, this does not make sense. Now that I'm 22, this book makes a lot of sense. Now that I'm 38, this makes more, and the older you get, the more this thing makes sense. But at first it's fun and light and exciting, but the older you get, the more it makes sense. And and also on top of it, the characters are Black. So you read it as, it felt like water, something that you felt interesting. But as you get older, you realize you do not see yourself that way a lot in media. And as you get older, you realize, you look back and you start seeing your past and seeing their past. You start understanding that there is more thought to what was being made for you. And that's what I try to put out there. And that's the type of work I'm hoping I'm putting out there for people.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. You know, it reminds me of Whoopi Goldberg and her talking about the work that she does in science fiction and how the first time she saw Aurora, and that there had never been Black people in the future. We just somehow went extinct. There was no representation, and representation matters so much. And it can be as simple as you can tell that there is a Black person on set doing, you know, hair and makeup because the hair of the characters looks like real life, or it looks well put together, or it's considered in a way that would not have been had there not been a person of color on that staff. And the writing, some of the sensitivities that you were talking about, some of the considerations and the inclusion and the way that people speak whenever you are speaking to a homogenous group rather than an other. It is a completely different way of engaging with the art, with the process. And it's so important that people of color be in the room whenever you're creating the, not just at the end, you don't want to just cast that person, but you need to make sure that these feelings, these words are authentic and it's a believable experience. And you can't do that if you don't have representation. So I always encourage lots and lots of representation. And also, I encourage growth of your cultural and historical and artistic interests early on. Like I'm in the mission of making lifelong museum lovers, cultural lovers, history lovers. People engage now and they fall in love and they keep coming and they bring their families. And as they grow, their families come. So it's absolutely essential that we take ownership of our cultural spaces. You know, you guys have, you know, the Met right next to you. You've got amazing, you know, museums, small cultural spaces, you know, neighborhood museums, house museums. They all exist and they all have something really valuable to share. And so if we can take advantage of our cultural inheritance now, it makes a huge difference in the world, the vastness of the world that we can have in the future. But I also wanted to talk about on a macro level. So legal, political, economic, social, technological, like these kinds of big overarching elements, how do they affect the worlds that you build in your more contemporary comic books? Like how are the effects of Black Lives Matter, of what's in the news right now? Like I know that in the Now zine, that there is information on what's happening right now and how we're affected in our world. Would you like to talk more about that?
In all of my work, I try to infuse what's happening now in the story. So for Now zine, that one was an experiment. I wanted to explore not just making books, but even change how I make books. So that was a book that was created off of a tweet. I sent it a tweet online to a bunch of people that I follow, and I've asked them to share with me, ask if anybody would be interested in just submitting how they feel about the world at that particular time. And I was gonna add it in a zine, and I just sent it out there, and I'm friends with a lot of very talented creators who responded. And as soon as they responded, I told them, you know, whatever piece they wanted, it was from comics to prose, all kinds of different types of subjects. But one thing that I realized is as I was putting the book together, the experiences of what's happening it was just interesting how they kind of interlocked, from what's happening to Black folks and with the Black Lives Matter movement, but also looking at what's happening to LGBT members of LGBT groups sharing their stories, as well as listening to other marginalized people talking about their experiences. And when you put it together in a book of people that I you know, I've only sent something online and they sent me such high quality work, and I sent them copies of the book, and I honestly don't make any profit from it. I just sent them the copies of book and they make money off of it. But it was an interesting way to publish and an interesting way to share our experiences and learn something about each other in that process.
That's beautiful. Yeah, you know, I was listening to WRKF NPR one day, and one of their commercials talked about how how all of the makers with Pixar felt that their bikes were cold in the rain, and that they're personifying things, and their ability to do so kind of stemmed from this innate feeling of connectivity with all things, with inanimate, with animate, animals, children, people, all the things, that there's some kind of life or experience that it has. Are you people who personify things, or are you more of a stoic who understands that that thing is only in existence, and you know, you don't have to eat things in order because the other ones won't get offended? Or is that just me?
Can you rephrase the question? That was a little too deep for me.
Do you personify things in your life? I'm just trying to get to, like, what is your worldview? How do you see the importance of the objects in your life?
Okay. Well, usually the approach I take is I like to be a little bit more direct. I don't use, you can use metaphors in some of the things I write, but I prefer to be a little bit more direct, because usually in creation, right? Like, let's say somebody like DC says, "Oh, we support all Black Lives Matter," right? So they'll write a story, and not to say they do this all the time, but it'll just kind of just touch on the story. It won't directly approach it. But I feel like Jacques and I are in a unique position where we can just pretty much say anything we want, right? We can
Yeah,
create
yeah.
anything we want without anybody saying, I don't think this is gonna work. It's like,
Yeah.
this is too direct. This might, offend certain people, or no, none of that. So we're lucky we can just go straight to the point,
Yeah.
without skirting about,
And
like,
you're both self-published. You don't have editors and all of these people hanging over your head saying, like, oh, you need to change this. It's not going to work for this market. You're
yeah.
actually going from the idea to creation and all of that process internally. Do you feel that that gives you a boost of being more empowered in making what you need, or do you feel that you're kind of rolling without a safety net?
No, well, we're rolling without a safety net no matter what.
I mean,
But
yeah.
so, like, we got nothing to
Yeah.
lose. So 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 I think, it's really great, because, like, for example, one of the stories I'm co-writing with another creator, TJ Sterling, called Villainous, we mentioned Trump directly, you know,
Mhm.
um, and we call out on certain things in his policies, or like certain things that he's doing. It's a futuristic, it's a sci-fi book, so it takes place 100 years from now, and it kind in their world, Trump and his supporters are the winners, right? So it's a future. Imagine a future like that, right?
Mhm.
So essentially, what I would call a good guy is now a bad guy in that world, right? And that's where the title villainous comes in. So in that respect, going back a little bit to what you originally asked, is yeah, I take more of the direct approach in things. I'm not gonna skirt about things.
Mhm.
And yeah,
Yeah.
we are fortunate, because as independent creators, that we can pretty much say anything we want,
Yeah.
which is great, because as an artist, you should be able to say anything you want. Um, and if there is an audience, and I believe there is an audience for it, they'll support you.
Yeah.
And the one thing I always found is when I first started, I was kind of concerned. I was like, I wonder if, this might be a little bit, too controversial. But I realized my book was not even controversial at all. It's not even the beginning. So
Right?
I'm
Yeah.
like, so now I'm thinking to myself, like, damn, I need to push myself a little bit more.
I've been wearing the kid gloves. You took
Yeah,
those off.
I need to take the gloves off. So,
Yeah.
and that's my viewpoint on it.
And for me, I use both sides. I am direct where I need to, but because I write all age and I write stuff for children, like younger children, I have to sometimes think in terms of what will traumatize them or what won't. So I have to kind of censor myself in terms of writing for all age audiences. But in the same vein, I still think that there's certain things that is okay for children to know and understand. Things that, if it's in the lived world that they see every day, I don't shy away talking about everyday things. But I have to be mindful that I don't want to traumatize children or alienate or traumatize children early, So that is
So with the exhibition that I'm doing, the Green Book, like that was a guidebook for travel. And it was used so that Black people could traverse the world safely. So what do you use as a guidebook, as a resource for yourselves to make sure that you are kind of traveling this path in a safe way? I'm going to ask that question, let y'all think about it. In the meantime, if anyone in the audience has any questions, anything that they would like to say, you can just line up right here and we'll ask it in the order that you come up. So what would you say is a kind of a guiding principle or a guidebook that you use for yourselves?
For me, as a Black writer, my goal is not to traumatize my reader. That's my goal.
Really good start.
But as a Black writer, a lot of times I feel like because of our lived experience, there's certain things that you do not have to bang on somebody's head to know that it has happened. And I try to be sensitive that I do want reality to be there, but I also I personally, in my writing, want to infuse hope in my writing. But it's not, I don't expect everyone to write that way. Other people write their stories better than I can. But for me, my guiding principle is that I always want to infuse hope. I want someone to you may get a few blows at the beginning, but by the end of it, you're gonna feel like, okay, I'm rooting for that person, and that's has always been my guiding principle, is that I want at least some hope at the end of what I create.
Yeah, and for me, the idea of safety comes from this idea that when you're creating something as a Black person, and usually you're creating it for Black people, there's sort of a fine line, right? Now there's a popular, I'm not gonna mention the name of it. It's a very popular entertainment show, and people will love it. And one day I was watching the season 2 of it, and I was looking at it. I was like, I understood the main audience was for Black people, but then at a certain point I realized, like, wow, I was like, if a white person was, like, a racist white person was watching this, they would enjoy this too, but from a different point of view, and I was like, and it was a fine line, and I was like, am I the only one seeing this? And it was interesting because, like I said, it's a really popular show, and I was like,
the same.
And I was like, man, okay, I see where they're going, but it's just like certain episodes really really bothered me. And then the funny thing, or the unfortunate thing, is like just a couple of weeks after I was thinking this, I saw one of those social media videos, and this racist white guy runs up to this Black guy saying stuff. I don't remember exactly what the incident was, and he quoted that show. He was like, just like and it's a Black show.
Just like, yep, totally saw that coming.
And he's so there's this racist white guy quoting this Black show, and I was like, I knew it.
Yeah.
I was like, and so for me, that's that's my guideline. Like I tried in terms of safe creating content that Black people could enjoy, but at the same time, there's a fine line between creating stuff that we could laugh at ourselves, and then some other things. So that's my safety line. That's the measurement I use. I
Mhm.
try to be like, okay, I try not to overstep that boundary. I watch myself in that regards. So that's one of the most important things to me in terms of creating content safely.
Yeah. No, I mean that's vitally important. You never want your words to be used against you, and
Yeah,
your
yeah.
content to be,
Hmm.
treated like a bludgeon.
Hmm.
And so, it is important to have that balanced worldview and understanding that even though you've created your work for a target audience, it's now out there. It's for the world to consume. And not everyone is going to have the same background or sensitivity or understanding. So, thinking far outside of your personal experience is really important. Well, I think that we have gotten to our time. We do have a question.
Hi, this is Jessica. Hi, Jacques. Hi, Newton.
Hi. How
Yeah.
Hello again. Um,
Hi.
so you both have daughters. How are you starting to notice? Do any of them have? Are they starting to have these budding creativity? So are you starting to see that they are um, having an affinity for world building, creating worlds that are, from scratch, or maybe an adaptation from something they see? Are you starting to see, just by being, I'm sure by osmosis or DNA, but are you seeing that can you see a future in world building for any of your daughters?
I definitely saw an Instagram photo. It's sort of
I know mine definitely. I know both of mine are showing signs of being writers. They write all the time, and I am sure it's because they see me write all the time. But they write all the time, and they have their little worlds and places that they want to go. And just today, my oldest, who is 10, wrote a story about a lady getting her first job and gets a ticket to the subway and miss her interview and goes into a magical world. And it's like, wow, they're going into it. So it's just exciting for me to watch them. But I don't push them, because I know the moment that I start talking about it, then it's not going to be cool and
not
they
going to
won't
be
want
cool
to do it
anymore. No, you're going to
anymore.
ruin it.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay, that's good. And I just go.
And you're just like, yeah.
And deep
In the
down
background.
inside,
Yeah.
yes, good.
My daughters are the same. They're 15 and 16, so they've gotten a lot older. And when they were younger, they used to write a lot too. And I was really impressed with their writing. I was like, wow, they write way better than I did when I was their age. And they're very creative people. My youngest one right now is into acting. She wants to become an actress.
Cool.
And no, actually, sorry. So my youngest one wants to be a director.
Wow.
She
Oh,
wants to
wow.
go into directing, and my oldest one wants to go into acting. And they've always been creative. My oldest one loves to draw, and they're very artistic. And it's for me, it's great to see, and I love it because it's like I'm a creative person, and to see that passed down to my children, I absolutely love it. And it's really something else because for me, it feels different because as a child of immigrant parents, my parents expected me to become, a lawyer, doctor, or engineer, and the idea of becoming some kind of creative person, an artist, and not, making good money and being seen as a real profession, was not encouraged at all. That was like a no-no.
You're
So
like, no, I have no clue what that experience is
yeah,
like.
so
First generation.
yeah, so
Yeah.
so being in my situation where I'm very Americanized, and I understand that it's still possible as a creative person to make a living doing what you love. You may not necessarily become a millionaire, but you can make a living. You can lead a very productive life. Being at this point where I'm able to shift that generational or the parental viewpoint as of what my child can become, for me is important. So I love the fact that they're pursuing creative endeavors.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm glad that you're encouraging that in them.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Did anyone else have any questions? No? Did you guys have any questions you want to ask of us?
No.
No. Okay. Well, cool. This was awesome. Thank you so much for being panelists for this panel. I know that, it's always weird and awkward and a little fun to do these kinds of interviews, but we really appreciate your time and your perspective. Your work is phenomenal individually, collectively. I'm so glad you exist and continue to support and patron. I love the way that you are not accepting any kind of limitations. You are continuing to create, to find funds, to continue to build relationships with your fan base, and really making something meaningful for a lot of people. So thank you for all you do, and thank you for being a part of today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for having. Yeah,
absolutely.
Thanks for having us.
I enjoyed your questions. You kind of threw us off in the beginning. You said, I'm not that prepared. All of a sudden,
exactly.
You're like,
I'm just like, what?
You're quoting our books, and I was like,
what book? What?
Oh, you clearly have not seen my interview. No, dude, I love to geek out on people. Like that is my nerddom. It's getting to know different people and their worldviews and their experiences and understanding like why and how that all interplays with the person they are and what they produce. Like, man, I dig that. So you guys are very fascinating. And I thought it was really cool that you both have two daughters. I think that, I'm
I was
an
like,
only
how
child.
did you know? How?
The interwebs told me. So maybe I looked up a little bit. But yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys.
All right. Thanks for having us.